Good morning for AM 1340 WGRV and 99.5 FM WGRV. This is Reid Seals, and I'm here with Greene County Mayor Kevin Morrison for our monthly interview. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Reid.
First question, if passed, how would Greene County have enforced the Second Amendment Sanctuary County Resolution?
Well, the Resolution A that was on the agenda for Monday night's meeting, the Second Amendment Sanctuary Resolution, had some language in it that was rather openly defiant about what our role locally is in the enforcement of those laws. Our legal team, Mr. Woolsey, addressed the county commission essentially with those concerns about how we as a legislative body would direct, for instance, the sheriff to enforce laws contrary to what was decided federally that may or may not be in contrast to the Constitution. As elected officials, our oath of office essentially says that we will uphold the Tennessee Constitution as well as the United States Constitution. And the sanctuary resolution had language in it basically saying that if the state or the federal government enacted any type of law contrary to what we understood the Constitution to be, then we could be openly defiant as that law goes. So, again, that was contrary to the oath of office that we took. It also put, for instance, the Sheriff's Department in a very difficult position, particularly the sheriff, about what laws we're going to enforce or not enforce. Mr. Woolsey used the seatbelt law, for instance, as an example. Do we tell the sheriff that we just don't agree with that law and that he is not to enforce the seatbelt law? The consequence of that, which was pointed out by one of the other commissioners, was the fact that the state can withhold funding for a myriad of our departments, solid waste, schools, most importantly, road money, any type of grant funding that might be coming back to the county that would be considered for infrastructure improvement. There's a lot of ways, for instance, that the state and federal government has to get your attention, but that was the big concern over the passage of Resolution A.
How would Greene County have enforced it if it had passed?
Well, it would have enforced it just like that, okay. which again may have gone unnoticed at the state and the federal level. I'm sure, for instance, in 1963, people were very upset when prayer was removed from school. There's a great debate now going on across the country about personal rights with regard to marriage, with regard to immigration, and essentially the 9 justices of the Supreme Court will decide those cases, and then the states are duty bound by the Constitution to uphold the law of the land. It is the law of the land, and that's the way the locally that we would have to do here. But had this passed, we would essentially have been in open defiance of whatever federal law we decided was our own interpretation. And that, as an individual, for instance, you have that right. If you don't agree with what the United States Supreme Court or what the Constitution has been interpreted, then you have a right to, personally, individually, to be in open defiance. As a general rule, if you're found and caught, then you're punished. But locally, that would have put us in a very difficult position.
What is the next step in asking the Tennessee General Assembly and the U.S. Congress to protect Second Amendment rights since that resolution passed?
Well, that was Resolution B, Reid, and essentially it was just an affirmation of the local elected officials' oath of office. It essentially said that we are in support of the Second Amendment. We're in support of gun ownership and gun rights. We're in support of not taking away an individual's due process to own or have a firearm. It is also an affirmation, too, of the Tennessee Constitution and the federal Constitution, our United States Constitution, and the affirmation was to the Tennessee General Assembly. So locally here, we're talking about Representatives David Hawk and Jeremy Faison, as well as State Senator Steve Sutherland, to basically say our community supports the Second Amendment. We support people's rights to keep, own, and bear arms. We support due process anytime that those rights have to be aggrieved, and we would like for them to advocate on our behalf and know exactly what position and where we stand.
Can you explain the purpose of raising the 911 surcharge rates?
The state of Tennessee came in and basically took away the local option of the 911 boards to regulate or raise, lower the phone surcharges back in 2013. And by a statute of the Tennessee General Assembly, it requires, again, consideration before the General Assembly to raise that phone surcharge on any electronic device, telephone, that has the capability to call 911. There's a surcharge on there of $1.16 per month, in addition to a lot of other surcharges that have a tendency to confuse people. But out of that $1.16, 2 cents of it is set aside for the purchase and maintenance of equipment for people that have disabilities, particularly hearing or speech disabilities, to call 911. They have that equipment here in Greene County. I've examined that stuff the other day after the 911 board meeting. It's fairly neat equipment, but 2 cents of it is set aside to maintain that equipment. That leaves $1.14 basically for the operation of the 911 districts across the state of Tennessee. Here in Greene County, we have one 911 center. In other counties, counties very close to us, they have multiple 911 districts. In my opinion, we are very fortunate that we only have to deal with one. We don't have multiple. But the 911 surcharge would be raised, or the proposal is to raise it from $1.16 to $1.50 on your cellular device, landline phone, business phone, to pay for increased cost as it relates to the 911 centers. So that money, again, would be collected by the major telecommunications carriers, sent to the state of Tennessee and Nashville, and then Nashville would distribute that back to the counties, much like they do the sales tax for the operation of the 911 centers. Currently, the 911 centers across the state are operating on a formula that basically funds the 911 districts with revenue based on 2010, 11, and 12 average. So whatever the average was across those 3 years, that's the funding most 911 districts are receiving. However, as here in Greene County, and we found out that our budget is $460,000 in the red, predominantly because we're dealing with 2019 cost, but we're only receiving 2010, 11, and 12 revenue. You don't operate your home that way. No one can operate a business that way. We can't operate the government that way either. So that's the reason for the request of the increase, and it's coming all across the state. We had a conference call yesterday as well on the 911 surcharge that the Tennessee Emergency Communications Board was meeting, essentially to reaffirm or to send on to the General Assembly that they agree with the phone surcharge increase.
Now, this resolution will be on the agenda for the next meeting, but why has a resolution been introduced to restrict how many can talk and what subjects can be spoken about during the public hearing at commission meetings?
Well, I think that resolution was born out of the fact that at this meeting, Reid, we had 35 individuals sign up for the public speaking portion. At a at a rate of 3 minutes apiece, with the ability to extend that another 3 minutes. The commission was looking at a 2.5 hour public hearing portion. According to Mr. Woolsey and our legal team, we're not really required to have a public hearing portion to our meetings, but it's always been tradition here in Greene County for the people who we represent to be able to come and address their representatives with complaints, solutions, issues, and problems as it relates to the governance of our county. And I value that highly. I think that government works best when the people have input. The resolution specifically deals with how the commission is going to conduct their meetings. For instance, as an individual, you have the right to come to me and say anything you want to. But at the county commission meeting, necessarily, the body can adopt rules or procedures for the conduct of their meeting, and that's really what that was. And it was an effort, really, in the interest of time, to keep people from parading sort of endlessly before the commission and saying essentially the same thing. I was very pleased, for instance, as I think the commissioners were in the feedback that I've received, that at the public hearing portion, that many people who were in support of the Second Amendment resolution deferred to other speakers or passed on their speaking time, as there were a number of speakers that said very eloquent, important things, and I think most people decided, hey, that person said what I wanted to say, and so I don't need to speak. So as long as we have sort of a reasonableness about those types of things, rather than just sort of getting up there and airing grievances just one after another, and hearing the same thing from one speaker after another, that was the impetus for the submission of that resolution. That resolution was pulled by the sponsor. I don't necessarily know that will appear on the agenda, for instance, next month or whatever. That will be up to the sponsor if they choose to do so. I haven't heard from the sponsor, for instance, if they want to consider it for a follow-on meeting, or they want to, gather public input about, how we can impartially do this and still hear from our constituents.
Well, I want to thank Greene County Mayor Kevin Morrison for joining us this morning for his monthly interview. I'm Reid Seals for AM 1340 and 99.5 FM WGRV.